or any minute. I suggest we start our meeting. The rest of the colleagues will join us along the way. Let me welcome the minister and welcome the SecDef and the team, and also welcome the acting Director General, General Mkwebi, and his team to the meeting. And then to all of the to all of you colleagues. We have how many items on the agenda, Peter? We have, I think we have two items in the main,
That's correct, sir. It's only the Department of Defense with their fourth quarterly report, and after that it will be the Department of Military Veterans with their fourth quarterly report, sir.
Exactly. That is the agenda for today, colleagues. May I now, at this stage, let me inform you, colleagues, that Brian is not in the meeting today. He was admitted in hospital this week. And hence you see Peter holding forth. We want to wish him a speedy recovery. I'm in contact with him. So I will keep members of this committee updated on his health conditions. So I want to leave it at that for now, colleagues. Thank you. Minister, let me invite you to make whatever comments you may want to make at this stage. We'll start with the quarterly report of the Department of Defense. That's the fourth quarterly report. Once we are done with that, we'll then move to the next quarterly report. At which stage I will, if you still be in the meeting, invite you again to just give us your opening remarks, so that your remarks are focused on each department, as it were. I don't want colleagues to club them together even when they deal with the discussions. I want to keep them separate because they're separate departments. For the first time, the Department of Military Veterans, it's has a separate vote, has its own vote. Its vote 26, standalone vote. So it's no longer on the back of the Department of Defense like it was the case previously. So I want members to keep that in mind. That the SecDef is no longer an accounting officer, an ultimate accounting officer for both departments. He's an accounting officer for DOD, while General Mkwebi is the accounting officer for the Department of Military Veterans. So let's keep those lines, dividing lines, very clear. Right. Having said that, Minister, it's welcome you early in the morning. I now invite you to make your opening remarks. I will just limit you, Minister, to 10 minutes. The time now is 9:05. If there is anything you would still have wanted to say, and you cannot cover within 10 minutes, will then fall into the discussion time. You'll still come back. Thank you. Over to you, Minister.
Chairperson, Honorable members, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this quarterly report for end of 2019 into 20, which is the fourth quarter. We welcome the opportunity, Chairperson. The person who will make a presentation on behalf of the department and take us through the slides. I hope everybody has received the slides from the department. The Secretary of Defense will take us through the slide and share.
Yes, Minister, we have.
Thank you. I will be part of a team which will then take field questions, Chair. We welcome the opportunity. We are ready. Thank you. I won't take 10 minutes of your time, not even 5 this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Minister. Okay, thank you so much, Minister.
Chair, I know I can be long-winded. I'm this time I'm disappointed.
No, not really. You are okay, Minister. Let me now invite the Secretary to take us through. Thank you so much, Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans. I would like to introduce my team. I will start with the team that is at the headquarters now, Dr. Kamede, and everybody else to introduce themselves so that members of the committee know who is supporting us in the presentation of this fourth quarterly report of the Department of Defense for the year 2019-2020. Can the team please introduce ourselves? Can you hear us at the Department of Defense headquarters?
Morning, Secretary. I understand they are trying to reconnect. The line went off, but they are connecting.
Chairperson, I think I should go ahead.
Yes, you may go ahead. They'll indicate once they have succeeded in joining us. Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the introduction of the report. The report, as Minister has indicated, has been circulated as the slides, and what we have also, Chairperson, members of the committee, distributed the written textual report of the fourth quarter as a supporting document to our slides. But for the presentation, I will be limiting myself to the slides. I will not be reading the introductory aspects of this presentation. The first aspect of it, or how do we? Sorry, Chairperson, about putting up the report. Can the central team, organizers of the meeting, put up our report?
Let's say our IT.
I will assist now.
Okay, thanks.
Secretary, are you on an iPad or what?
No. I'm on the laptop.
Sharon, there is military veterans. We want the other one, DOD.
Oh, okay. Oh, you are at HUFO. Okay.
No. I'm on a remote side.
Okay. All right.
Not that one, Sharon?
Oh, thank you. There it is.
That's
Thank you
that
very
one,
much.
yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can we then, I've already introduced the structure of the presentation, which is on slide number 3. And slide number 4, is an introductory part whereby we're required in terms of the guidelines of the National Treasury and Department of PME to define our report according to the legislative requirements, which we have done before. This is indicated in slide number 4, in slide number 5, in slide number 6, and the performance report will start with slide number 8. In slide number 8, we are doing the analysis of the DoD performance indicators, indicating that when you look at those indicators, 12 of them are in the ministry, 40 are in the South African National Defence Force, 23 in the Secretariat, and 3 of these indicators are with the organs of state that are reporting to the Ministry of Defence. And we have also indicated the targets now for the fourth quarter, as it has been indicated in those rest of the 2 circles now. The circle on the top of your on your right hand side, basically it divides the various the targets that are sitting in different programs of the DoD. Slide number 9.
Yeah.
Can you mute, please, at the headquarters? In slide number 9, the analysis, we are giving the analysis of the DoD targets per main programs. These are the programs of the Department of Defense. You will see there the indicators and the targets that were set for the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and the fourth quarter. We are focusing on the fourth.
If you are on, because the PC is just started.
Please mute your mic at the headquarters. Mr. Kabindo, we can hear you. The next section of our report deals with the strategic overview of the report itself. Now, in terms of the strategic overview, as highlighted in slide number 11, the 2015 Defense Review still remains the main document of the Department of Defense. Here, in terms of the strategic activities and directions, we are highlighting the consultations that we have had, both with the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the Republic, as well as the National Treasury Director General from time to time, and the Minister of Finance, as well as the Minister of Public Service and Administration. The implementation of the Defense Review 2015 still remains our guiding documents and work in progress. While dealing with the strategic review on slide number 12, we look at the corporate human resource status has been highlighted. The main issue that we come up with there is that our cost of employees for this quarter, as it has been for the rest of the financial year that ended in March, is still the ceiling is still below the requirement of the Department of Defense, and as a result, we have acquired over expenditure in this section of the cost on the cost of employees. This is indicated in slide number 13. That the South African Department of Defense requires the HR strength of 77,000, and that on average we are running on a strength of about 75,000 of the regular forces, and the planned reserve force man days are those of 2.693 million man days, and these were maintained within the quarter under review to execute the DoD's mandate over the quarter under review as well as the MTF. The DoD reduced its strength during the quarter under review, and but from the financial year of 2014, our strength has generally been reduced from 78,632 to now 74,000 by the end of the quarter under review, 74,096 by the 31st of March of this year, which constitute a reduction over these years of about 4,536 personnel. We will go to slide number 14 to begin to look at corporate governance and accountability according to the standards of reporting as outlined by National Treasury and Department of Monitoring and Evaluation. We will not be going into details, but these are the structures within the Department of Defense where the Office of the Secretary for Defense continues to provide strategic direction for the department, and this include the timely decision making, and also our interaction with other departments and interdepartmental meetings that we have as constituted that needed to be attended within the government, that include Director General's foresight meeting, cabinet headquarters, and the cluster meetings. Still within the corporate governance accountability, in slide number 15, we indicating that actually when we look at this quarter, the fourth quarter of the financial year 2019-2020, which was from January to March 2020, it was one of the most active quarters that one has ever seen since over the past almost 10 years that one has been in this Office of Secretary for Defense. One of the major activities that started during that quarter has been the Department of Defense being one of the leading departments in the government's response to COVID-19. This involves the Department of Defense to be actively involved in support of particularly the Department of Defense, the Department of Health, as well as the South African Police Services, the COCTA for corporate governance, and local government, and these activities, they continue up to this day. These are highlighted in slide number 15, as well as in slide number 16, where we indicate that the South African National Defence Force had to be the leading state entity in the repatriation of 114 South Africans who were stranded in the city of Wuhan in China because of the breakup of the COVID-19 pandemic there in the Hubei province, and they had to be repatriated to South Africa, and the South African Defence Force, South African Military Health Services, to provide the medical care services as they were being quarantined in the Limpopo province quarantine facility. For this, the Department of Defense is also part of the socio-economic recovery plan for the country post-COVID-19 restrictions and lockdown. In slide number 17, we are highlighting that we worked as the Department of Defense in a multidisciplinary team comprising of all the work streams of the net joints, which forms the coordinating structure for the National COVID-19 Command Council in developing and consolidating a draft framework on the risk-adjusted strategy to deal with the virus. That is captured in slide number 17. In slide number 16, we will not be going into details. We feel like this is being brought to the attention of the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee in terms of our involvement in defense diplomacy. For this quarter, everything went according to the plans that we have had. We did not see any major deviation or any areas of concern as raised here in our defense diplomacy slide number 18, and the defense diplomacy. Are the slides moving? In slide number 19, as well as when it comes to slide number 20, we are beginning to deal with the command of forces. The South African National Defence Force, as I have indicated, had one of its most active period during this quarter under review. In support of the people initiated by the previous administration as part of outcome number 3, all people in South Africa are and feel safer. The South African National Defence Force was deployed 15 companies to execute Operation Corona, which was a border safeguarding deployed in the provinces of Limpopo, Mpumalanga, KwaZulu-Natal, Free State, Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, and Northwest provinces. The Operation Corona is the maritime patrol along the west coast, along the east coast, along the southern coast and east coast of Hermanus and Hans Bay over this period of from the 13th to the 31st of January, where it was in support of the South African Maritime Authority in terms of the ships that were seen in that area, and the naval fleets were called in to assist in that regard. Slide number 21, we look at various performance activities of as part of our Operation Corona, highlighting various operational successes, the number of weapons that were recovered, the number of illegal foreigners that were apprehended, the number of criminals that were arrested, the stolen vehicles, the dagga confiscated, livestock recovered, contraband goods confiscated, and various precious metals that were confiscated during this quarter under review. Just to highlight the fact that on this border operational successes, it is interesting that the media is reporting over the last 2 days that because of the closure of our borders due to the state of national disaster and COVID-19 regulations, we have a number of illegal, undocumented nationals stuck in Zimbabwe who are coming from other parts of Africa and the world, like from Pakistan, Ethiopia, including Somalia and Malawi, who usually would then be trafficked by the illegal human traffickers through Zimbabwe to South Africa. Now, because the borders are totally closed, these illegal migrants have been dumped by the human traffickers. They are there in Zimbabwe. Now Zimbabwe is beginning to experience a major problem, as the media reports, because now the illegal migrants can't get into South Africa, and some of them having to be repatriated back to their countries, others having to be arrested and put in prison in Zimbabwe. I thought that was just a major interesting point to say, when we open up the borders, we will have to take that into account to make sure that we can tighten up the regulations of our border management before we fully open up our borders post-COVID-19. Slide number 22, as part of the command of forces by the South African National Defence Force, we are highlighting the Operation Prosper. The Operation Prosper is the operations that the South African National Defence Force is engaged in support of the safety and security support, in employing multi-role military capabilities on request according to the prescripts of the Defence Act. And during this quarter under review, the South African National Defence Force supported the departments of Northwest Province with the support of water and sanitation, by providing infrastructure support in order to maintain essential services in various local municipalities area in the Northwest. We also rendered support to the South African police in controlling crime and instabilities in the Cape Flats and other gangster-ridden areas of the Western Cape. This operation by the South African National Defence Force was successful, started on the 12th of July 2019 and continued up to the end of the quarter under review on the 31st of March 2020. Slide number 23, we look at Operation Chariot. Operation Chariot is the operation that involves the South African Air Force in various disaster aid relief. During the quarter under review, the South African Air Force hosted an injured person in Kwasai Mane in KwaZulu-Natal on the 15th of January, as well as the medical evacuation of hikers that got lost and stuck in Detroit's Kloof Pass in the Western Cape on the 15th of February during the quarter under review. Other operations of the South African National Defence Force during the quarter under review were those operations associated with Operation Arabella. Operation Arabella is the operation of the Navy in sea search and rescue as requested on emergency basis, and for the quarter under review, the Navy conducted the medical evacuation of 5 poisoned sailors from the ship Vanguard in the Durban area in January. There was also a medical evacuation of a sailor from a ship in the Durban area on the 15th of February. The search and rescue for a downed South African Civil Aviation Authority in George area in January, and the search and rescue of a rubber duck boat with 6 occupants that went missing in Old Bay and near the Robben Island area in February, and the search and rescue for a capsized rubber duck boat with 13 sailors, 5 nautical miles from the city of Cape Town on the 27th of February during the quarter under review. In slide number 25, in terms of Operation Ditaba, Operation Ditaba was the operation that I described earlier, where South African National Defence Force supported other departments and DECO as well, Department of Health, to repatriate 114 South African nationals from one province to Polokwane for the quarantine during the quarter under review. Slide number 26 begins to talk to the Operation Notlela, which is the operation of the South African National Defence Force in support of the Departments of Health and Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs, as I indicated, for the national response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is in support of the national effort to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus, which started during the quarter under review. And with the escalation of the number of cases of the coronavirus in South Africa, the President took a decision to enforce a nationwide lockdown with effect from 26th of March, which was extended again on the 30th of April. This decisive measure is aimed at potentially saving millions of South African lives from infections, as well as the livelihoods of people around the country. The South African National Defence Force is hardly involved in that regard. I think the Minister will highlight other activities that we are doing as part of fighting COVID virus, but it's not just the deployment for security and assisting the police, but it's also deployment of the South African National Defence Force to support the Department of Health, both with medical healthcare providers, number of doctors, more than 100 doctors and 150 nurses that are being deployed as we speak in different provinces, especially the hotspots, to assist the Department of Health in combating the scourge of this virus. We are also deploying engineers to assist with the Department of Water and Sanitation to ensure that people have access to water, because without access to water, there will be no washing of hands, sanitization, and other hygienic activities that are so critical in the fight against this virus. The number of South African Army engineers are being deployed to assist the departments of water and sanitation with access to water, distributing of water tanks and water tankers in those underserviced areas. Also, we have a number of engineers that are deployed to build the Bailey bridges in the rural areas, so that the communities in rural villages can access clinics, can access social grants, can access food distribution, can access all other socio-economic support that they so need to mediate the negative impact of the coronavirus, as well as the restrictions that have been brought about by the lockdown operations. In slide number 27, in terms of creating a better South Africa and contribution to a better world, we are highlighting that the South African National Defence Force continued in the peacekeeping operation of the United Nations Operation Mistral, as well as part of Operation Copper. The South African National Defence Force, the Navy in particular, continued its support to the Mozambican Defence Force in fighting the piracy operations, whereby the SA Drakensberg had an extended long-range patrol during the quarter under review, where this time it extended that patrol all the way north of Pemba towards the Tanzania border between the month of February and the month of March during the period under review. Also during the period under review, in slide number 28, we're highlighting that we had a successful Armed Forces Day. We are giving the details in that slide, which I will not read at this point in time. Now we would like to go to slide number 30, where we are beginning to look at the selected performance indicators and the targets that we set ourselves, and as to how far we went in achieving those targets during the quarter under review. We met the target for the Defense Attaché deployment offices. We also targeted for this year under review to have 3,510 military skills development members in the system for this year. We were able to achieve that, and there were 3,761 military skills development. Just to highlight that this, we set ourselves 3,000 simply because of the limitation in our budget. We do require to have 10,000 at any given point in time military skills development members, but then we have cut it from 10,000 over the last 5 years to 5,000 and now to 3,000 because of the limited budget that we have. So we just highlight that although we say we met the target, it is a reduced target due to reduced allocation of budget. It is not an adequate target according to the requirements of the South African National Defence Force. And the number of reserve force main days were also met, and the percentage compliance with the Southern African Development Community standby force. As far as standby force of SADC is concerned, the South African National Defence Force has pledged, committed to support the logistic hub, which is in Gaborone, for the standby force. And in this regards, we then contribute almost about members of the portfolio committee about 12 million rands a year, but also personnel in support of that logistic hub of the South African Development Community countries standby force pledge. When it comes to the percentage of both external and internal operations, as highlighted in slide number 30 and slide number 31, those commitments that we made were all met. Still in slide number 31, a number of joint interdepartmental, interagency, multinational military exercises that we were committed to. We only committed to one, and that was because of the reduced budget, one military exercise, and that was conducted during the quarter under review. The deployment of the South African National Defence Force companies along our border as part of our border safeguarding indicator, we continued to deploy 15 companies as per our budget, although we know that what is required is more than 15 companies. Our last estimate was 22 companies to efficiently and effectively make sure that our border are adequately safeguarded. The number of hours flown by the South African Air Force, I think we had the best results in a number of years, whereby we met 94% of the target that we set in terms of the number of hours that were flown. But we did not meet the target at all for the Navy in terms of number of hours at sea per year. We only met 66%. So that in itself has a major negative impact in terms of the protection of our ocean resources as well as maritime security around our coastal areas in the Indian as well as in the Atlantic Ocean. In the next slide number 32, we put into breakdown of those number of hours for the South African Air Force in terms of number of hours that was and the targets for force employment, VVIP, and force preparations. As I indicated, 94% was the best achievement that we have had in a number of years if you compare to the year before, where only 71% of the targets were met. The slide number 33 is the breakdown now of the number of hours at sea per year. As you can see, we have not made much progress. 17-18 we were at half, 50%. Financial year 18-19 we went to 64, and now for this financial year under-reported we only went up to 66. So we are still way below the targets that we need to meet in order to make sure that we have an efficient, effective maritime security and defense of our maritime resources. Honorable members and chairperson. The next section of our performance report, we summarize in slide number 35 the number of targets that were achieved and the number of targets not achieved quarter by quarter from the first quarter as well as the second, third quarter, fourth quarter, which is the quarter under review. Since the fourth quarter is the last quarter of the financial year, we look at also year-to-date status, whereby the targets that were achieved were 72%, and the targets that were not achieved, we have a typo there, where we say 23%. Number of percentage not achieved is not 23%, but it is 28%. For correction, honorable members, apologies for that mistake, in slide number 35. The next section of our DoD fourth quarter report is the section that deals with the financial performance information. Without reading line by line, we judge the major areas where we would like to draw the attention of the members of the portfolio committee. Starting with slide number 37, where we are highlighting that since this was the fourth quarter, the last quarter of the financial year, the budget, slide number 37, the budget that was allocated to the Department of Defense for this budget vote, which was 50,888,000,000, and then the expenditure was about 50,886,000,000, and the unspent amount was 1.425 million, was about 1 million. So we did spend all the money that was allocated to the Department of Defense up to a point of 99.98%. The only money amount that will be returned to Treasury then will be about 1.5 million. The breakdown of the expenditure for this quarter as well as the financial year to date is highlighted in slide number 38. For the members to look into. It should be noted that these are not audited figures, and that the suspense accounts are not yet finalized, and the actual expenditure and the appropriation statement might change accordingly as we finalize the suspense accounts and as we audit these financial figures that are highlighted in the summary of state of expenditure in slide number 38. Slide number 39 breaks down that expenditure according to the economic classification, and the suspense accounts are also not yet added in here. In slide number 40, we are highlighting that for the compensation of expenditure, for the compensation of employees, we had an over expenditure of 2.6 billion rand. That was mainly due to the National Treasury allocation. And because we have an over expenditure, which is classified by National Treasury as irregular expenditure on the cost of employees, as highlighted in this slide, number 40. In slide number 41, you will see then that you have under expenditure in the goods and services. Simply means that monies for the goods and services were moved from the goods and services into the cost of employees, as highlighted in that slide of number 41. The next slide is a slide of irregular expenditure, and we are highlighting for the members that we had for this financial year end now, and an irregular expenditure which 2.6 billion rand for this financial year was due to the cost of employees, as we have already indicated, and the non-compliance with the supply chain prescripts was 169 million rands. We just want to highlight that this is still an area of concern in the Department of Defense. We are dealing with all our under irregular expenditures as required by the prescripts, and in this regard, investigations have been instituted, and that in order to identify the officials responsible so that we can have consequence management, and where required and also where indicated, we can have condonement of some of these irregular expenditure, because irregular expenditure in the eyes of the public is wasteful expenditure, but in reality, this irregular expenditure did not result to say wasteful to the department, because services were rendered for these contracts, but it's that the contract, when it was allocated, it did not follow all the prescripts of regulation. Some of it, we still engage in discussions with the National Treasury in terms of interpretation of the Department of Defense of the processes following and the differences that might exist between the Department of Defense and the National Treasury. And the Auditor General and the National Treasury is looking into that to see which ones are condoned and which ones are to be declared irregular, and where should we have consequence management. This is indicated in slide, but just to highlight, the year before, the irregular expenditure was 722 million, and for the year under review, we have brought it down from 722 million to 169 million. Most of that due to engagement with National Treasury in terms of different interpretation of these prescripts, as well as condonement of some of the interpretation where it is found that there was no official to be responsible. In slide number 43, we give the breakdown of those irregular expenditure. Which contracts were these? These were the asset verification contract. As I said, the service providers are on site providing that service, but there was question in terms of how that contract was procured. The South African Navy spare parts and storage contract, whereby there's still some engagement with the National Treasury to see whether this can be condoned because of different interpretation, where the Navy buys the spare parts and then the spare parts remains with the service provider instead of coming to the Navy, in terms of the arrangements that were made that resulted in questionable irregular expenditure of 19 million, as well as the procurement of ICT services. Although the procurement services followed the DoD, it was felt that for ICT services we have should have gotten concurrence for the Ministry of Public Service and Administration before that contract was approved. And this is irregular expenditure as highlighted for both 17-18 and 18 and the financial year 18-19. So it was in the previous years. The total life total life support contract management is highlighted here. That was in 2018-19, and but also had still need to be regularized in 1920. That's why it's the previous year, but it's highlighted in this current financial year because it has not yet been regularized. And the same thing for the licenses. These were the Microsoft licenses that were obtained through a third party, and the question whether it should not have been obtained directly from Microsoft, and the investigations in that regard are going on, and that contract investigation is with the ICU as the minister had requested. That will be the end of the presentation for this quarter report, and thank you very much, Chairperson, honorable members of the committee, and the minister.
So much for the brief overview. You've taken us through all the essential areas, overview on the performance against on the implementation of the 2015 defense review. You've given us overview on the various operations within the department. You have also taken us through the selected indicators and targets, and right through to the summary of the quarterly performance. And then at the end, you touched on the irregular expenditure. Colleagues, having received that briefing, thank you very much, SecDef. I welcome everyone else. SecDef, do you still want to complete the introductions? I can see your colleagues at head office, so that I know who's in the meeting before.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that will be important because they will also be assisting with answering the difficult questions that the members will be posing. I told them that there is no free lunch at the defense. But would you please, Dr. Kamete, lead the introduction on your side, like everybody introducing themselves?
And thank you, members. Good morning. I'm Dr. Irregular Expenditure, Chief of Defense Strategy and Planning. And I'll allow the members on my left to introduce themselves. Thank you, General.
Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members, Major General Arun Tswana, Chief Military Police Strategy and Planning.
Morning, honorable Chairperson, honorable members, I'm Dr. General Chief Director of Planning.
Morning, honorable members, my name is Lana Msiki, Chief Director of Budget Management.
Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. My name is Pure Sokela, the Chief Financial Officer for the department.
Good morning, my name is Reggie Maremi, PNO DOT.
Good morning, everybody. Karim Fandila, Director MEW.
Good morning, Chairperson and members. Adam Abonsi, Chief Director of Financial Services.
Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. My name is Dixon Subramani, Acting Chief Director, Strategic Management.
Good morning, honorable members. Sam Mutende, Head of Ministerial Services. Thank you.
I think that completes the introductions on your part, SecDef.
Yes, thank you very much, honorable Chairperson, members of the Portfolio Committee. That it completes the introduction of the members of the team who will be assisting us this morning.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, I don't see your hands on the screen. All right. Any other? I don't see the hand. I can see Mare. Mare, you still cannot unable to press the thing there to use the technology. Hey, Mate.
the thing, you know, I don't know about the thing, but yes, I'm a bit
okay,
impaired.
all right, I can see that. All right, Mr. Mara is the first one. Any other colleagues? Any other taker? Questions and comments? Mara, you go first. I invite you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Much appreciated. Thank you, SecDef, for the presentation. Chair, just before I start with my observations and questions, I just want to say that my suggestion is that in the future we must have these two separate sessions. I mean, for DOD, we probably need a whole 3-hour session and not just pushed into 1 hour or 1.5 hour. There's just too many things that is of challenge in the department. But saying that, just my first point is cost of employees. SecDef will remember and recall that in the 5th Parliament, for a number of years, the overspend on cost of employees was funded by reducing the SDA, a problem that we are sitting now in terms of funding our capital expenditure. So that was a problem that is now caught up with us. My question on the overspend is that we are constantly getting this conflict of situation where National Treasury again says, you know, that we have to get back within the limits, and DOD says, sorry, we are sticking to 75,000, we need more money. Now, my question with regards to the reduction of the goods and services, we obviously need to know, SecDef, what those goods and services are. If it has been funded through austerity measures and cost cutting and reprioritization, why is that now affordable and justifiable, and why was that not in the past being implemented when we were talking about that, and when National Treasury asked to do that, and it was then told to us that no, it cannot be done, but now it is done. How does that affect the performance and the defense readiness of the Defense Force? That's my first point. Then secondly, with regards to just the importance of Clela, COVID-19, one thing that you haven't touched on that I do believe that we as a portfolio committee must consider, and that is our own soldiers, our own members who have been employed throughout South Africa as part of this operation. Now, they are exposed to the COVID-19 virus as well. And we know that there are some soldiers who have been tested positive. But we know that they are housed currently often in hangars. If I can use the example just in the Western Cape, they are housed at Fort Ikapa, where most are living in hangars as huge groups. Now, we also know, and you will know, that there are soldiers that have been tested positive, but all of the whole group must now be quarantined. And that has got a major effect of exposure to the unaffected soldiers at this stage in that same hangar, also in terms of the employment numbers available for the service in all the different areas. Now, my question is, why don't we, or to what extent are you providing for those soldiers in 2 military hospitals, the field hospital that was supposed to be erected on the premises of 2 military hospitals, the other field hospitals that have been provided in the different provinces like the Western Cape, we know, and also we know at the Youngsfield military base, there are tents. There are tents that has been provided for civilians to probably house there. But why don't we use that for our own soldiers? I mean, they are sacrificing a lot, and it seems like we are not really looking after them. And I'm really, really concerned, because then the whole purpose falls flat to use them. Then my other question on this, on the SDA, it has again now been showed to us how we have reduced that over the last number of years. Now, obviously, we have identified that as a point, and you know, we must discuss that further. On the 2015 Defence Review, you are referring again to that work in progress. Secdev, you know, in the 5th Parliament how many times we have asked questions on this, and the only answer we are always getting, it's work in progress. We also know what National Treasury has said to us. We know in the previous session last week, we have said that this is unachievable, this is unaffordable. Pardon me, but I get very frustrated if it's the same response every single time. It's work in progress, but we know that it is unaffordable, unachievable. What is the alternative? When do we start to look at changes to the Defence Review? On Mistral, I've read the last week or so where there was reports about the minister meeting with the UN, specifically with regards to Oryx Royfok, our Force Intervention Brigade component, and we need to know where we stand with regards to the Royfok specifically and the refunds. In your presentation, you have referred to the involvement earlier this year with regards to those contracts. But we also read that the UN is not keen to extend the contracts with regards to the Royfok, and I have read that they are talking about a $1 or a $0 compensation for the use of the Royfok. What is the impact of that on the refunds, and obviously on the cost for the defence force and our budget going forward? On defence diplomacy, can you give us, you know, the justification for those additional, you know, contracts that has been signed for those various countries that you have referred to in your presentation? And then the defence attachés. We've got currently 44 defence attachés, and we know that's a huge cost to the defence force. And I just want to know the value that we are getting from that, and do we use them whenever there's end-user certificate inspections in that regard? In terms of Operation Copper, we have also seen and heard last week or so about possible ISIS conflicts that is erupted in the north of Mozambique, and I think the Minister of DIRCO has indicated that there was a request from Mozambique to South Africa for support, and I mean, you and I know that there are groups of our special forces being, you know, moved up north to Durban for exercises and training and possible deployment into Mozambique for that purpose. Can you elaborate on that and just please assist out on that? The other important thing is the flying hours and the sea hours, the maritime hours that you have referred to. I mean, that is of a concern. Is that the result of the SDA money not being available, or what other reasons are there? Because certainly it seems like in terms of flying hours, the VIP hours has been fully utilized, but force preparation and force employment is obviously the flying hours that we haven't reached. And in terms of maritime sea hours, it is force preparation and employment. So is it the effect of the SDA? How are we going to mitigate that? What is happening currently with the midlife upgrades of the frigates and the submarines, and how will that affect us? Then just lastly, from my side, on the irregular expenditure, you've referred to the time as at 31st of March, and then for the financial year 2019-2020, and we know that the financial year ended on 31st of March 2020. Those differences in those two figures, is that one only for the quarter and the other one for the financial year? accumulated over the financial year, and if you could just explain that to us. Chairperson, for the moment, that is from my side.
Thank you very much, Secretary. You may come in before I recognize the other colleagues. May I invite the colleagues to use the technology? Like on your right, you can go to, I don't know where you go, where you indicate, you raise your hand. If you can't, I will still ask you to shout your surname. But before that will be after the Secretary has responded. Secretary?
Sure.
I'll come to Mare after Secretary. Secretary?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I will ask the CFO to look into just taking us through the ceiling on the cost of employees, the overspend, and the negative impact that this has when we have to move funds from goods and services or SDA into the cost of employees. And in that regard, I think I will invite the CFO and assist with that. I will also just request, Honorable Chairperson, that some of the questions raised by Honorable Mare, I understand the reason raised, but they are operational questions that in our defense are defined as indicators that are classified, such as operations for the special forces and other operations that the South African Defense might be involved in. Maybe the chair can make arrangement that it is discussed under closed doors, as according to the parliamentary rules and regulations. We'll start COVID-19 just to assure the members, and the minister, I think, will be coming in there, that we do look after our members first. The priority in COVID-19 is the safety and the health of. So the minister come in I'm sorry to delegate upwards, but I thought it is important for the minister to come in that regard for the exposure of soldiers to COVID-19 and our operations in that regard. Then going straight to the Defense Review 2015, Honorable Mara, you are right. We have gone through this, the milestones, and that we do say work in progress, but I think it's reasonable. I will ask Dr. G and General Ramazwana just to talk on terms of the implementation of the Defense Review, in a regard that wherever there is no requirement for additional funding, we are in the process of implementing this Defense Review. But in terms of why don't we, if we can't afford it, why don't we change it then? It's because it was based on the requirements of the country. We want the members of Portfolio Committee of Parliament on Defense and Military Veterans to be aware that by not funding, by not mobilizing for funds for the implementation of the Defense Review, we are putting our country as a whole in danger, if I can use the word in danger. I think people will say that when you find yourself in a situation like in Mozambique, and you think about what capabilities the defense force in Mozambique had, and how when the peace returned to Mozambique, and the signing of the peace negotiations agreements between the Mozambique and the other forces in that country, everybody felt Mozambique is at peace. No need for defense equipment. And now, as Honorable Mare comes and say Mozambique comes to South Africa to request for support, I hope we won't find ourselves in a situation whereby we neglect the Defense Review 2015, we scale it down out and say it's not affordable, let's change it, and then when the time comes, years from today, we have to go to Angola to ask for assistance because our own defense force can no longer defend South Africa. I hope we won't come to that, and that's why I'm not going to change the requirements of the Defense Review 2015 because the country requires, unless if the parliament, which is within the authority of the parliament to say, no, we don't need defense review. If you say you don't need defense review 2050, but this parliament adopted the defense review 2015, and this parliament said we need this defense review. So why would this parliament come to us again and say we must change it? What has changed? I'm sorry, I'm becoming emotional a little bit, but let me take a deep breath. We do, Honorable Mare, have a challenge when with Operation Mistral in the DRC. A minister has been leading a delegation to the United Nations peacekeeping offices, and I think we have made a little bit of progress under difficult conditions. What's happening is that the United Nations says we don't have funds to keep the Roy Falk operating in the DRC. And the position of the South African contingent in the DRC and the position of the South African government is that you can't have troops deployed in the DRC without proper protection. It will be difficult to deploy young women in the DRC.
So there's disruption in the background. I can see a person with the number 076-228-4773 has his or her mic unmuted. Will you please mute your mic? I'm not too sure if the noise comes from this cell number. All right, you may continue, Secretary. And anyone who please, can you check your mic, establish it if it is muted, so that we cannot be disrupted. Over to you, Secretary.
So what you find is that the United Nations would, according to the letter of assist, give you a budget to totally run the equipment. So we know the reimbursement as far as deployment of troops, there will be no issues. And then when it comes to the equipment, they will give you a total budget. Let me make an example. They would say, you will deploy the two Roy Falks, we will pay you 100 rands a month for this deployment. Here is an agreement, and please make it available according to this schedule. Now, when you say he said, and now they're saying no, we're no longer going to pay you 100 rand a month because we don't have the money. And then now we are negotiating to say, but we can't withdraw the Roy Falk because our troops will be exposed. We will keep our troops there on a dollar-based agreement. Dollar-based agreement simply means we keep our Roy Falk there, and we get reimbursed for the cost. So when we fly, we calculate the fuel, we calculate the maintenance, and we go to the United Nations and say, we have rendered you this service. Please pay us a fee for this service that we have rendered you. It's no longer a letter of assist compact agreement. Now it's a dollar base. So the United Nations will pay us dollar by dollar that we spent, and we must prove that we have spent that amount. So that's what it is, Honorable Mare. This is still under negotiations with the United Nations, but there's a clear understanding that we are not withdrawing the Roy Falk there because it will affect the deployment of our troops. Then when it comes to the use of the attaches that are deployed. As you know, they're deployed as part of first the South African diplomacy, but also as part of our military diplomacy. And the impact, I think, the impact that they have, first of all, is to support the department, the government in terms of its international diplomacy with all the activities that they're involved in. Yes, they do assist with the end user certificate as well, but they are there to promote the Department of Defense. They are there to promote the country as well. And as you would know, quantitatively, it's hard to say we are getting so much for the dollars we spend on the defense, but it is part of our international relations and our defense military diplomacy that we have. That is important for the country to have, but it's true that we do have challenges as far as the financials are concerned. And yes, it is true that when it comes to the flying hours, I mean, especially to the hours at sea, one of the reasons why we were not able to meet the target is because of the pressure that we find in our budget, as well as the utilization of the SDA sometimes to assist with covering the cost of employee. The irregular expenditures that they are not for the quarter under review. The irregular expenditure are always calculated in terms of financial year, but of year to date. But even then, also, it's not just year to date. They also include those that were accumulated in the previous year until they have been condoned by the department. By the Department of National Treasury. Can I ask the CFO to come in so that the minister can come in also to conclude our response?
CFO.
Thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Chairperson. In terms of the overspending on the compensation of employees, if we go back on the 2017-2018 financial year, the National Treasury reduced the ceiling of the compensation of employees to 60-something thousand of people. But the department already had people on the ground of about 74 and above. Now, what does that mean? The budget that National Treasury allocated to the department was according to the ceiling that they set, which was lower than the amount of people that we are having on the system. Definitely, that one led to the shortage of the budget on the compensation of employees. Because the department had an obligation with the employees, we had to find a way how we're going to pay those salaries, of which we had to find through the goods and services. We needed to make sure that we understand on the goods and services in order to fund the compensation of employees, because we got an obligation that we need to honor to our employees. Chairperson, if we did not take that road, it means the department was going to a trench. The question that one needed to ask ourselves, the government, does it say we need to retrench the people? Because if you set the ceiling lower down, what are you saying about the people that are already in the system? That is the challenge as a department that we are having, because we already had the people in our establishment. So that's why we chose to say, let's try to save under the goods and services in order to fund the compensation of employees. While we were doing that, Chairperson, we are still engaging with National Treasury on a continuous basis to prove that those people that are on the foot on the ground, we still need them as a department. So that engagement is still continuous, Chairperson. Thank you.
so much. That covers some of the questions. In fact, the majority of the questions. I know the minister is indicated to also make a comment on this. May I acknowledge the presence of the DM as well. He was held up at a cabinet subcommittee meeting, DM, isn't it? Yes, you are welcome. You started at cabinet subcommittee. Now, with that, thank you so much, dear. With that, let me invite the minister. Minister, do you want to say one or two remarks on the COVID issue, and without going to town?
Thank you very much, Chairperson, honorable members. I've noted the question raised by Honorable Murray with regards to our state of preparedness for COVID-19. I can assure you, honorable members, that currently what we have is total beds for quarantine 3,271. That was at, I'm just trying to check the date. That was of the 25th. By now we should be having more. But I equally would like to say, yes, honorable members, we have had members on quarantine. We've also had members who have been a big number of members who have been tested. And that, as you would know, yes, we would have those who are positive, very few, but it is not in our interest to disclose such numbers. But what we have observed is that the rate of recovery of those who have tested positive is at 90%. We have not as yet had deaths, except for elderly military veterans who were retired in the Defence Force from years ago. Those are the ones we have lost. But in the reserve force, in the auxiliary force currently, which has been mobilized in the regular force, we've not had deaths, honorable members. But I want to make an appeal, Chairperson, through you, that whenever honorable members find an opportunity in the provinces where they are, honorable members have a right to go into the bases nearer to them, just to check our state of readiness, because that will serve as will enhance our process of probing and let us know if you are hitting problems. I see, Chair, you are scratching your head as though you are saying you're not sure about that one, but it has to be done, and we can only depend on you for purpose of oversight, so we can correct whatever. But what we have now, the Army, I don't know, I can break it according to the units, but what we will do, Chair, the document which I have, I can always forward it to you so that you can distribute to the honorable members. But each one of the units, be it the Navy, SAMS, and Air Force, they are quite prepared. Yes, Honorable Murray, you raised the matter of a field hospital. There's a field hospital on 2 mil, in 2 mil. But equally, there's another field hospital which is currently being erected in Saldanha on a field which we identified last week, which is likely to take about 1,000 beds. That's going to be a quarantine site. For now, we have no crisis whatsoever. For now, our soldiers are well taken care of. Those who have tested positive, we're fortunate because most of those who have tested positive are what what you say, Doc, asymptomatic. We not as yet have had people who are very sick, Chairperson. Lastly, Chair, the matter of the attachés, 44 attachés. Just to say, Chairperson and honorable members, there's currently a process underway from the Department of International Relations, which will soon be brought to Cabinet, where we'll be able to make an input about rationalizing the numbers of diplomatic offices, our embassies, and with the sole intention, of course, of downsizing. And yes, during the course of that, the Defence Force will also be in a position to take decisions about reductions in that space. We have no choice but to do so. There is no money to sustain all the embassies currently. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Minister. And thank you, Secretary and the CFO. May I now recognize Ms. Speakers and Mr. Ryder. Ms. Speakers and then Mr. Ryder. In that order, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Yes, I'm struggling with the raising of the hand, Chair. I don't know what is wrong. But
Yes,
thank you, Chair. Sorry?
I'm saying most of you are struggling.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Chair, mine is on the status of the deployment to the Northern Cape to assist in COVID-19. Are there any maritime security deployed, but also to strengthen the border safeguarding? The reason, Chair, why I'm asking is I'm concerned about the spread of the virus because we do have the sea in the mouth, and our communities ask a lot of questions about the fisher boats there. There was, for example, a case in Kamiesberg of endangered succulent plants at the coastline of Kamiesberg. And the police was just lucky to be there at the right time at the right place. But also the smuggling of cigarettes over the border of Namibia. And it strengthened the danger of infections to increase. So I just want to ask, is there a possibility to look into strengthening the deployment if possible? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Speakers. Mr. Ryder.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think we'll all struggle with the hand because it's been disabled or the license doesn't extend to cover the raising of the hand. But anyway, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And once again, thank you for the invitation to join the meeting. Chairperson, I just want to clarify a little bit. The comments from the presentation said that there were 77,000 people required in order to fill the organigram. There was a reduction from 78,000 to 74,000, and I'm just running the numbers off to the closest thousand for ease of reference, but there was a reduction to 74,000, which is well below the 77,000 required. And yet there's still over expenditure of 2.6 billion rand. Now, noting, of course, that the Chief of the Air Force and the Chief of the Navy both made presentations where they were indicating that they needed additional funding in order to keep the equipment up and running at the satisfaction. They needed approximately R1 billion. So I just want to keep that in the back of the minds as a question. The answer of 77,000, but it appears, and of course Mr. Murray and the sector have a history of discussing this, and the rest of us might be slightly left out, but it appears that those 77,000 positions are not entirely funded. So Treasury has not funded all 77,000. If that's not the case, then there seems to be a misalignment of the organigram or non-adherence to it. But the fact is that the sector have indicated that by not filling the positions, we're putting South Africa at risk. Okay, but by not keeping our equipment at a satisfactory standard, we're also putting South Africa at risk. So what the sector is effectively telling us is that he has put forward an organigram Treasury has not funded the organogram, but they've pushed ahead with it anyway, or they continue to adhere to an old organogram anyway, without a strategy to fix this situation going forward. So I'd like to hear from the Secretary, are we going to end up with a funded organogram? I believe it's illegal not to have a funded organogram going forward, but it is important to hear what the department's position is going to be on this organogram going forward, because if we're going to sit with an unfunded organogram into the future, it's highly problematic and something that we as a portfolio committee need to raise a red flag to. So I'd like a lot more clarity in terms of that over expenditure, and on what basis is over expenditure on human resources prioritized above over expenditure on equipment resources. I understand that people are involved and so on, but there must be a strategy to reduce the force if that's the situation. I mean, we've already seen people being deployed recently with nuclear brown equipment under the recent deployment of forces, and that equipment must be at least 16 years old that the guys are walking around in. Is it still safe? The next question I have, and of course the COVID-19 employment of forces was only after the quarter four closed, I believe. On the 21st of April, we received the letter from the President, which spoke about the additional 73,180 members that were employed. If I can just ask, how many boots are actually on the ground? If we can get an indication of how many people have been on the ground through level 4 and now going into level 3, especially with the reduction of the or the removal of the curfew. How many people are still required on the ground going forward under level 3, and how many were employed under level 4? And then again, I want to ask about the sea hours issue. Food security is becoming a massive issue worldwide, specifically as a result of the impact of the virus, and of course the economic impact of that. So food security is becoming a massive issue, and we've seen a lot of abuse of our fishing resources, and people entering into South African waters apparently at night. They're sitting just outside in international waters during the day, and then at night apparently they enter our areas. Is there a plan to increase the sea hours to ensure that we are protecting our resources with a view to consistently ensuring food security going forward? Chairperson, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. SecDef, over to you.
Person, I'm going to ask General Ramantswana to prepare a response for the deployment in the Northern Cape, which I think is very important, as well as to assist the participation of Honorable Ryder in terms of boots on the ground. Honorable Ryder, I would say that might be also difficult because, as you can imagine, we don't have the constant number all the time. If you think about this, the troops are being deployed from the bases where they are. So as I speak now, and next to the base that we have there in Johannesburg, you would have these platoons being out on deployment day, coming to rest, and then the following day another platoon. But under normal circumstances, they are still based in their military facilities. Of course, in addition to that, you'd have those who might be moved from one province to another depending on their requirement. So it's a little bit challenging, but I think it's an important question, and I think we do need, if General Ramantswana is not ready, I'll be happy to request the chairperson to give us time so that we can account to the Portfolio Committee and Parliament in terms of deployment as by the Constitution. Said Mr. Ramantswana will deal with that, as well as the Honorable Biokas question on Northern Cape, which is, I think, is also important. Honorable Father, let us take you through a little bit on the personnel and the cost of employees. The challenge started in 2016. Before 2016, we were able to have the required strength in our force. Yes, fluctuating from time to time, and the required budget with the cost of employees adequately covered. In 2016, the government took a decision that we are going to cut the wage bill. And that wage bill went across to affected different departments, but for the Defence Force, they said they will cut a wage bill by 3 billion rands every year for the next 3 years MTSF period, starting in 2016. That 3 year, of course, was 2019, and now we continue with it every 3 years. You have that shortage of 3 billion rands, and it's almost never changed, even from 2016 to 2017. Our over expenditure is always about 3 billion. Now, when we do the calculation of it, we are saying that in order to fit in that cost of employees, you need to have 65,000. If I was saying to Honorable Bierkes, or Honorable Ryder, I'm giving you so much amount, hire your people, have your personal strength to this amount, you will then say to me, okay, I'm going to cut down to 65,000. Then I'll be within the ceiling that I have provided to you. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you cut from? How do you cut the defense cost to 65,000? So these are the discussions that we can engage, but at the same time knowing very well that the required strength is 75,000, we need to cut 10,000 on the average to 65,000. How do you do that? Do you then go and do retrenchment and ask the government? We even asked that question to National Treasury and asked the question to the Public Service and Administration, and they couldn't. When you say, okay, now, I'm ready, I want to comply, how do I cut from 75,000 to 65,000? And besides, on the other side, the chief of the South African National Defence Force says, hey, SecDef, you can't cut 65,000, otherwise you will have an unsustainable. On the one side, the government is increasing the missions, you have to go to the maritime security, you have to go to the borders, you still need more people in the borders, we still need people to be deployed in peacekeeping operations. Now you have COVID, you still need to assist the various departments, and you want me to cut down to 65,000. How am I going to do that when you're increasing the missions on the other side? So when they say, okay, no, I'm not, I agree with you, Chief, I'm not gonna, it really makes no sense to cut to 65,000 because we won't be able to meet our commitments. So there's the kind of argument that we're in up to now. All I would say is that to meet, we have done the calculations with the cost of, with the ceiling that we have, you can only afford 65,000, and right now we're running around 75,000. We need the portfolio committee to assist us. I remember at one stage I was saying to Honorable Mare, if I make you Secretary of Defense today, what would you do if you're in my position with this issue? So that's the kind of issues that we are facing. Thanks very much, General Maton.
General?
Chairperson, SecDef, thank you very much. SecDef and Chairperson, apologies. The audio this side was bad, but I did hear, I think, the question from Honorable Bierkes that was asked with regards to the Northern Cape. I think I did get the one with regards to the flying hours, so the audio this side has not been very good. But just to say, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Members, with regards to the deployment in the Northern Cape, we have deployed as the SNDF in each and every province. And we have deployed both members of the regular force as well as members of the reserve force, and this is the same case with regards to the Northern Cape. Not only that, but we are deploying in Operation Corona coastal patrols that we are doing at present, and we are deployed in the Western Cape. So there is also an additional capability which we have put in place at this stage, and that is to deploy the surveillance capabilities within the South African National Defence Force, and that would include as well UAVs. And other capabilities that are available that would assist us in terms of surveillance in this particular area. And over and above that, Chairperson, the most important thing is here that to ensure that our operations are intelligence driven. So we do react, especially with coastal patrols, wherein there is such information that would require that we respond as urgent as possible. I think that is about the patrols in the Northern Cape. That includes our deployment for both Notlela and for both border safeguarding in that area. Chairperson, with regards to, if I did hear very well, the audio this side is not okay as I indicated, but there was a point that was mentioned by the honorable member, that is with regards to, can we increase the sea hours? Well, Chairperson, that is what we would love to do. I think where we are today, if we look at the availability of our capabilities, where we do have them alongside, we would love to increase so that we can do much more than we are doing at this point in time. But I must say, Chairperson, so far so good, in view of the fact that we have managed we are managing to deploy for coastal patrols, and we are managing to make use of some of the surveillance capabilities that we have within the inventory in the South African National Defence Force. So yes, given if we are able to get our vessels seagoing, quite a bit of a large number in that regard, yes, of course, we can be able to increase those sea hours, and we would love to do that at any given point in time. Thanks, Chairperson.
No, thank you so much. I think we've covered all the questions that two colleagues raised. Please, can you note the following questions, General? Sorry, Secretary, from my side. One, you have 78 indicators, the 140 targets. But today, or in all the quarters, your quarterly performance report, you report on 10 indicators and 10 targets. In other words, you report on 10 out of 140 targets. So there is about 130 targets that are not reported on, that were not reported on in quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, and now in quarter four. It's fine, I have no problem with that. We'll interact with all the targets when we interact with your annual report. It's fine, I have no problem with that. But my question is, what was the rationale, the reason behind selecting the 10 targets? Is it because the core of the core of the department, or they consume a huge chunk of the budget, as it were? And then two, I looked at your admin program admin. In program admin, you have about I think you have 89 targets, 89 out of 140. In other words, out of the 140 targets you have got, 89 are allocated to admin program 1. And program 1 is about 6.1 billion rand of the 50.5 billion rand. Now, what was the reason you allocated so many targets to spend 6.1 billion rand, 89 out of 140 targets? I'm trying to understand the reasoning, the rationale behind. Chair, sorry, Secretary, I will just leave it at that. I need you to go into town because I know we'll interact with you when we deal with the issues later on in the year. I'm trying to understand the rationale that informed your decision between yourself and Treasury to lift this 10 in the expenditure of national, in your estimate of national expenditure. And any other colleagues, I will just take one or two questions before, so that we leave time for vote 26. Any other question, colleagues? Right. Doesn't look like there's any other question. We just reflect on those on this sector, and then we move off to the next item.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll just quickly reflect on it, but I'll also ask Chairperson to be excused. I have another meeting related to our COVID-19 activities that starts now at 11. I'll have to be at the operational center at 11. But yes, you are correct. It's really based on the budget. And the reason why you would see, you would say 89 targets maybe in admin, but you don't see them coming, because if you think about it, the admin is really salaries. So the cost of employees, you have already paid for the cost of employees to do all the admin work. So when we account for it, we say that this cost of employees is already accounted for so much. And also we interact with National Treasury. That give us guidance to say that when you report, make sure that you have selected the targets and indicators. But as we say, you have 140 targets to go through them, all of them one by one, policy this, policy that, and IT system and admin this and admin that, both in all the programs. It might actually have limited benefits. That's why we select the main core functions, core budget kind of related targets, Honorable Chairperson. But we do have a full report, as you have indicated, on all the targets, and it will be also covered now that we're dealing with the fourth quarter in the annual report. Thanks very much, Honorable Chairperson. I'm going to ask to be excused when we're done with the vote.
Yes, so you'll be excused just now. Colleagues, I want us to wind up on vote 23. DM, do you want to make any comment before I ask the Minister to wind up the discussion on vote 2023? I want us to finish before 11 o'clock on vote 23.
No comment from my side, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, DM. Minister?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I sent you a message there because I wanted to know, I wasn't sure if it's a portfolio committee or a joint standing committee.
Yeah, you see, it's a portfolio committee, Minister, but because we operate like this, we brought in it to include members from the NCOP.
No, there's no problem with that, Chair. But it is always advisable that right at the beginning of the meeting, we be informed whether the meeting is open or closed. Because that determines...
Our meetings are always closed.
Not always, Chair. Not always. Let me just...
No, Minister.
Yes?
Minister, no. Maybe you're referring to a standing committee on intelligence.
No,
Minister. Our meetings, unless we specifically request that it be closed, and we must then apply to Parliament to grant us permission to close the meeting, and we must give the reason why we want to close the meeting. Over to you, Minister.
Okay, that's what I'm asking, Comrade Chair, that if it's a joint standing committee on defense, at times there'll be occasion where you will close the meeting, and we must be told whether it is closed this time or not. As a result, I will not talk to the matter which was raised earlier on Mozambique. If needs be, we can have a session later on. Maybe I can have a conversation with you and one or two members so that you can understand the context within which the minister raised the matter in the media. There are challenges in Mozambique, yes, there are. But whether there was a request to South Africa or not is another matter. My understanding right now is that this is a matter which is being handled by the whole region. It is being discussed by SADC.
We'll consider that, Minister.
The second matter is on Op Minstrel. Chairperson, fortunately, I think the people who felt very, very strongly, correctly so, about deployment of our troops, particularly the Force Intervention Brigade in the DRC without air cover, are still here in the committee. I recall that Honorable Marais was one of the people who felt very strongly on the matter. Rightly so. So even now, we have made the point to the UN that whatever the challenges, for as long as we continue to deploy in the Eastern DRC, we will have no choice but to keep our Royfal in the Eastern DRC. It's important to note, Chair, that the strangest thing is that people were saying there is no money to pay for the Royfal, but in fact we learned that there were choppers which they were acquiring from Ukraine, for instance, which do not do a better job than what the Royfal does. Choppers which they were prepared to pay for. So it is for that reason that we've remained steadfast in pursuing the fact that the Royfal should remain in the DRC for as long as we have our soldiers deployed to the DRC. Lastly, Chair, Honorable Marais just sent me a message because I did respond, remember, to the matter of how much bed space, how many bed space do we have for COVID-19 for quarantine? And he's just sent me a message that there are some members who are in Ikapa who are positive, who are on quarantine. So I'll follow up that matter now and we'll give you, Chair, I'll call you and give you a feedback on the matter. On the last matter of food security, which has been raised by Honorable Ryder, Chairperson, I'm sure you are aware that there is this program called Upatlala, which really is trying, but it's not as moving as fast as we would have wanted it to. Upatlala, now Upatlala, which is chase away indlala, hunger. It involves agricultural projects between the department and communities. Now, this was launched in the Northwest for a start. Then it went to the Free State. But what we're trying to do, I've directed the chiefs through the COD that Kubatala should have a footprint in all of the provinces. And I believe that if we can maximize on Kubatala, we'll be able to ensure that there's food security in South Africa. So we'll be working closely together with the Minister of Agriculture so that she too can guide us as to which areas she would want us to move into as quickly as possible with this program. I thank you, Chairperson. If there's, I've not responded to an issue, I'm sorry.
No, Minister, thank you very much. You've done very well, SecDef and the team, DOD. Thank you so much. DM, I know DM because we're going to deal with the DMV. I'm not too sure if the Minister will also stay behind. We're happy for the engagement. But before I release the team, Minister, I want to inform Minister and SecDef that since the board of inquiry into the causa matter released its findings. We members of the committee have been inundated with emails. I don't know how many emails I think my laptop, my iPad is now almost full because of the emails. I think it's a petition from the members of the public. They appear outraged at the findings of the board of inquiry, and so the matter is gaining momentum out there. I want you to be aware that it's being brought, our attention is being brought to the matter. I don't know what the colleagues will say towards the end, but I felt I should just indicate that, that we are not going to disregard. Minister, want to say something on that?
Yes, I would like to say something, particularly because I don't know if you did follow the media briefing which we had last week where this matter was raised. Chairperson.
No, I didn't.
I'm sitting here. I'm a minister responsible for defense and military veterans. The deputy minister is also here. Both of them have not as yet received a report on the board of inquiry. To a point
let's edit at that level.
No, let's not end it there. Let's not end it there. The point is, and then when I checked, what is this which I'm hearing, because it was on ENCA, then we discovered that when the team completed its work, they took the report to the chief of the SANDF, who sent it back to them because he was unhappy because the terms of reference had not been all covered. And that is the report which I have been given. As far as I'm concerned, work is still being done on the basis of that. Sitting here, we have not seen the report precisely because it is not a matter which has been concluded, Chairperson and honorable members. Thank you.
No, I think, Minister, that helps. It heals, in fact, that the report is still work in progress. What might have reached the media was the preliminary report. A final report is yet to be released to the public. Am I correct to say that, Minister?
Chairperson, can I just add on that, please?
Sorry, Minister, you wanted to say something before I recognize Mr. Murray so that hear what you say?
Let Mr. Murray go ahead, Chair, and then I'll respond.
No, I just want to get the status of the report before I open it too much, Minister. Must I accept this as a preliminary report? Yes, Minister?
I don't accept it even as a preliminary report, precisely because the two people who are at the helm of the department, right, who had directed that there be a board of inquiry, have not even seen the preliminary report. So that which has been told to us that, no, Minister, this report is not complete, it was leaked, etc., work is still being done, right? But as far as I'm concerned, there is no report, and therefore I can't give status to the report. I am waiting for the report which will be presented to me and the Deputy Minister by the Chief of the South African National Defence Force.
Now I can deal with the issue. Mr. Murray, there is no report.
Yes, the only thing that, but the only thing that I know, my information is that there was an affidavit apparently submitted by the department to the court after the findings of Judge Fabricius. So if it was not a report, what is then the status of that affidavit submitted to the court? I mean, I'm pleased with what the minister has said, because we know that the military ombudsman is also involved in this case. It's wonderful news, but it seems like there's just a lot of contradiction, especially if this has been a report or a response submitted to the court in reaction to Judge Fabricius' findings. So obviously we need some final clarity on that. Thank you very much, at least for the response.
Yes, well, the matter will come to us when it has been concluded by the department. In other words, when after the minister, both the deputy and the minister has signed it off. For now, not signed it off, they've seen it because it must be signed off by the Board of Inquiry, but run past her, only then it could be made public. All right, so let's leave it at that for now. At least I'm happy we're leaving the matters at this level. There's no report before us or before the public as yet. Thank you so much. Right, Minister, Secretary, if you are excused, may I now take this opportunity to invite vote 26. General Mkwebi is going to take us through the quarterly performance report of the vote. But before he takes us through, he will introduce his team so that we know who are there to help him deal with the questions. General Mkwebi, are you there? General Mkwebi, are you there? I don't know what. Yes, may I know who's that?
It's General Mkwebi speaking.
Oh, General Mkwebi, welcome to you, sir. You may introduce the team and then launch into the presentation. It's your opportunity now. Thank you so much.
With your permission, may I accept that the minister, the deputy minister, was going to probably introduce the issues of the department before the actual presentation, or must I just go ahead?
IT, can we bring it up?
Yes, I will do it now.
Good. Okay, whilst she is beaming it up, will you introduce your team, General?
Okay. No question. Thanks, Chair. I will ask the team to introduce themselves, starting with the DG Muff.
Good morning, Chair, honorable members, Minister and Deputy Minister. My name is Nondobeko Mafu. I'm a Deputy Director General for Empowerment and Stakeholder Management. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, honorable members, Minister and Deputy Ministers. My name is Sibong Senendovo. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at DMD. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, Minister and Deputy Minister and honorable members. My name is Sandy Sasiyamo. I'm the Chief Director responsible for research and policy development. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, honorable members, the Minister and the Deputy Minister, good morning. I'm Nandi Panzaruba, currently Acting Deputy Director General Corporate Services. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and honorable members, Minister and the Deputy Minister. I'm Ms. Makalim Moafudi, the Director in the Office of the DG. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's the team, which is ready to support in terms of the presentation, Chair.
Okay. No, thank you so much, General. The presentation is now on the screen, and you may then take us through. But just before you do that, may I indicate that the Minister is asked to be released. I'm sure she has left already, and but the DM is still in the meeting. So okay, so that is still in order. Over to you, General.
Thanks. In the process of preparing the report, we have followed the policy guidelines given by the Department of Policy, by the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation. We observe those guidelines. And we are talking to Q4 of the 2019-20 financial year. And we have submitted through the ministry all the necessary documents following the prescribed prescripts. Before one speak to the actual presentation in terms of performance information, I will probably just allude, Honorable Chair, to the issues of COVID-19, which are not indicated as per our report. That once COVID-19 was at least declared as a pandemic, and also under the National Disaster Act, as a department, we followed the circulars and direction given by the Department of Public Service Administration, and we did send the rest of the officials which were not needed to work in remote areas. And those who were also able to work within the office did work within the office right through the process from alert level 5 up to now. And we did at least do deep cleaning in terms of our headquarters, and we did sanitize the building. And we did provide the PPEs required to make sure that we are also at least safe, and also we observe the regulations. Up this far, touch wood, we're still safe. Nothing negative has happened as far as the DMV officials are concerned. In terms of our provincial offices, because they are under Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, and there are few individuals there, we initially closed those offices, and it's only now where we're preparing to officially at least make sure that with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, they are sanitized, and then we can be able at least to take on from that environment. As for our military veterans, working with the Department of Defense, mainly the South African Military Health Services, we were at least informed about how we should manage that, and if they are affected or they've got challenges, which numbers they should at least link up with. What now we know as of yesterday is that one individual who was in the Eastern Cape had to go to the Western Cape for dialysis in terms of his challenges. But once there at the hospital, he did at least contact this virus, but he's been declared at least safe, so he's recovering. Then the other one from the Eastern Cape has passed on, and both of them are male, and they are about 56 years old. That would be at least what speaks to COVID-19 as far as DMV is concerned. Then going to the actual presentation, Chair, I would ask assistant in terms of the slide. Next slide. That's the outline, Chair, of the presentation, which will be mainly speaking to non-financial performance information and also looking at the approved budget program structure, where Program 1 will be speaking to administration, and Program 2 will be speaking to socioeconomic support, and lastly, Program 3 speaks to empowerment and stakeholder management. Next slide. Well, that's the mandate of the department, Chair, which is informed by the Mental Veterans Act number 18 of 2011. And of course, it speaks to the national policy and standard for socio-economic support to military veterans and their dependents, including benefits and entitlement to help realize a dignified, unified, empowered, and self-sufficient community of military veterans. Next slide. Just to also, Chair, give a little bit of detail in terms of the budget program, we speak to the sub-programs. Under Program 1, which is administration, we've got about 6 of those sub-programs. The 2 other programs, which is Program 2 and Program 3, both of them about 3 of their sub-programs as indicated on the slide. Next slide. think that's already covered. Next slide. Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Now, this slide, Chair, speaks to the summary of the performance analysis of the department during this period, Chair, where it's indicating that overall we have achieved 30%. But then if we then at least go per program and starting with admin, and then we concentrate more, since we're speaking to Q4, more on the yellow part of the different programs, then we would then be able to say in Q4 under administration, we plan to at least achieve 7 targets. And those objectives which were set, unfortunately, we were able to achieve 3 under that give us 43%. Then if we move to, sorry, just go back. Then if you go to sales, a similar arrangement where we go to the yellow, which is Q4, we planned 8, we achieved 1, which then amounts to 13%. Under ESM, we planned 5, we achieved 2, which speaks to 40%. Overall, it becomes 30%. Thank you. Next slide. The color coding legend Chair does help in terms of what is understood to be achieved is marked green. The amber part or yellow part speaks to partially achieved, and the red speak to not achieved. So we'll be using those color coding in terms of indicating which indicators and targets have been achieved or partially achieved or not achieved at all. Thanks, Chair. Next slide. That's a graphic presentation of what has just been said, Chair, in terms of the previous explanation, in terms of Q4. So I won't be repeating that. Next slide. Next slide. Now, Chair, probably I will have to concentrate more on the yellow part of the actual presentation, and then explain what has happened in terms of various indicators and targets which we set for ourselves, Chair. Now, under administration, Chair, going straight to PPI 102, which is partially achieved, which speaks more on the communication strategy activities. And we planned 100%, and we have at least achieved 70% of that, and there's a deviation of 30%. And if you go to the comments on the far right of the metrics, then go to the reason for deviation. The publication which were planned to be at least finished before March were delivered by our service provider after March, and then that led to us not achieving. And going forward, we're looking at least addressing that by making sure that this annual publication, there's an annual publication plan with both the communication side and supply chain management have agreed in terms of how that is going to be speaking to deliver of those on time, and their timelines will speak to that. Then I go to PPI 104, which speaks to the integrated database management systems, and that one is not achieved at all, Chair. And the challenge there speaks to, in terms of the comments, that for us to be able to put this system in terms of the ICT, we are reliant on CETA, and we've got a service level agreement with CETA. But unfortunately, between ourselves and CETA, we seem not to be succeeding to achieve what needs to be achieved. There are a number of reasons which speak to that, and hence we have also approached as a kind of trying to correct the challenges. We approached the relevant department which oversees SITA, and we had a sitting with the DG there to find out whether we can have a better way of addressing this, even if it might require us probably working with SITA, with a service provider coming from the private sector or whatever. So this is what we're engaged in going forward to improve that situation. The next one, which is partially achieved, is PPI 105, which speaks to the payment of invoices within 30 days. And the challenge mainly there is speaking to the reason why we are challenged to one of our service providers in terms of traveling arrangement of the department and officials, where it's travel with flag. Unfortunately, in terms of the invoices coming from this particular company to ourselves and the processing of that had a challenge to such an extent that we had then to at least come up with a system to be able to track the invoices coming from there and be able at least to make sure that we can pay them on time. But because it is manual, it has then created a challenge again in terms of our capacity and volume to and the volumes which come through in terms of this country. We tend to create delays. But we are looking at that going forward so that we can be able at least to deal with this 30-day requirement payment of the invoices. The under admin, there's the last one, which is also partially achieved, speaks to the employment within the department and representation of various groupings. In this particular case, we're speaking to persons living with disabilities. We are saying that our recruitment, which was more a general approach, sending out application and probably not receiving the relevant and required person in certain instances, we are saying that we need to at least undertake a targeted approach. This is approach so that we can be able at least to meet the required target check. That would be the issue of Program 1. Next slide. That is Program 2, Chair, which is socio-economic support, where we have achieved only 1 out of 8. Next slide. Chair, in terms of, again, the way to at least put across, I tend to skip the green ones and concentrate on the ones which are partially achieved and the ones which are not achieved at all. Now, the PPI 202 Chair speaks to the number of military veterans provided with built houses per year. That also speaks to the target was 300 for the year right to, and also about 100 bond to be rescued. But for this particular quarter, Chair, we planned to achieve 100, but we achieved 57. And out of bond rescue, it was 25, we achieved 30. And we are saying, Chair, part of the reason why we have at least not achieved, if we go to the comments, is that in the previous quarter, what we thought would be delivered in quarter 4 was mainly delivered in quarter 3 in terms of build houses. So in the light of that, we are saying at least we have, that's the logic behind, but it at least allows us to achieve the original annual final target set. But we still also have challenges with 2 provinces in terms of the department engaging the KwaZulu-Natal and the Free State, also to make sure that our military veterans in those environments are taken care of. Those are the provinces which are also challenged. In terms of the bond rescue, we planned about 25, we achieved 30. And in a way, Chair, in this, we are reliant on people applying. And now that's the challenge. So we then get with those which we managed to receive to process them. Then the following one, Chair, speaks to PPI 203. Speak to 203, which mainly is speaking to the military veterans verified and captured on the National Military Veterans Database. It is red for the quarter, Chair, because we planned for the year 30,000. But for this particular quarter, which is quarter 4, we planned 7,500, but we achieved again 766. Now, part of the logic, as it was almost similar with the housing, is what has happened in quarter 3, where although we planned for 7,500, we achieved 37. Therefore, in terms of the annual target, in a way, we would say when we finally consolidate the annual report, that environment will also show green. Although for the particular quarter, informed by what happened in the previous quarter, we have not achieved what we set ourselves to achieve. The next one, Chair, which is also not achieved in terms of the quarter 4, it's 204, where we are talking about the number of bursaries provided for mental veterans and their dependents, where we planned for the year 7,466, and we only achieve less than that. And part of the challenge here is that when the issue of trying to utilize the NSFAS environment, and we referred our tertiary students and to NSFAS, then some of them were taken on board. Those were the ones we also planned to take as a department. But then when they were approved by NSFAS, it then took out the original planning in terms of us achieving that check. And also, we are looking at the challenge of, in terms of the communication and dealing with various schools right through the country of basic education, and of course some of the private schools. We're looking at the method of making sure that we can fast track the necessary documentation for us to be able to pay, because presently there is a challenge there. And from the parents too, in terms of the required documents like the unabridged certificate, that has created a problem in terms of us being able to pay and be able to achieve what we want to achieve in terms of that check. Then if one then moves to the next one, which also is not achieved, Chair, it speaks to the military veterans provided with compensation payment. Now, these are the military veterans, Chair, who might have at least experienced challenges during their military life in terms of injuries, physical, mental, psychological. Now, we have then a service level agreement with the Department of Defense and working with the Military Health Service, where they've got doctors dedicated to assist us, where we get applications right through the country, and then once we've got those, then we engage the SEMS department, and then we then undertake this. And how we do it, we go to province by province, and then we manage that. And now the plan for this quarter was 75, but we have achieved 6. Even the 6 we have achieved, Chair, it was mainly the question of disparities in terms of payments, that they were not paid according to the percentage of their injuries, and then we had to at least close that. But we did at least assess some military veterans which the medical panel could not attend due to the non-availability of the chair of the panel, who was on leave at the time. By the time she came back to engage in this exercise, it was then during the period of COVID-19. Therefore, the exercise could not be finalized. So that's the challenge here. But going back, that we are looking at also making sure that by the at least this quarter we finalize, which is quarter 1 of this financial year, not the last financial year, that we finalize that process, and then we can be able to make sure that these military veterans are also paid, those who qualify. The following one, Chair, speaks to 206 in terms of the number of military veterans and their dependents provided with their counseling. Again, those are the 1,000 we planned for, and for this quarter it was 250, and we're able to achieve 160, and there's at least a deviation there. Now again, we're depending on military veterans also applying for this benefit, and then again with SAMs going up, but we'll continue engaging and making sure that at least we militaries are informed and also are aware, and also they understand who actually qualifies, because if the injury or the challenge they might be facing has got very little to do with the military activities. This is where the challenge sometimes comes in, that we need to make sure that they understand, because when they come through and the challenge they have in terms of what they are applying for has got nothing to do with formal military operations, then they do not necessarily get. The next two indicators, 207 and 208, are talking, Chair, to the and honourable members, to two policies, which is pension and subsidized public transport. And we were saying that by this time, we have managed at least to put it on the ground in Q4 approved policies, both for pension payout to those who qualify, and also for those who might need to travel, that they are able to be assisted in terms of public subsidized transport. We have managed for the pension to come up with a draft policy on the pension part. And we are also engaging in terms of consultation with the relevant stakeholders to make sure that at least they are aware. And we're talking here of the Advisory Council, of the Minister, and the Appeals Board. And the structures which are there will speak to SANPA, making sure that at least they are informed about what we're doing. So once we are done, they will be able then to follow the necessary approval process. And we are of the view that by Q2 of this financial year, which is 2021, we'll be done with that. The next one, which is public transport, we are in a process, we've already initiated that, and we are engaged with the Department of Transport and with mainly their subsidized different entities are engaged in this exercise. And there was a view that we'll be able at least also by Q2 of this financial year to be able to put this policy in place, having consulted the relevant stakeholders. Chair. And then at the end of the day, as it was said, this is mainly the area where we're challenged, but we're looking forward to make sure that at least that's done. And what probably might also be in the interest of the committee chair and honourable members is that both of these environments, in terms of capacity and capability, there are just no warm bodies to do that. Then we rely on bringing other people from their own present jobs and probably getting some assistance sometimes from the Department of Defence to make sure that we can be able to move with that. So these are the challenges the Department is faced with. The last program, Chair, is Program 3. Yes, and as it was indicated, the planning for the Q4 was 5 targets. Targets achieved, there are 2 of them. And that gives us 40%. Next slide. Thank you. As has been the norm, Chair, I will just concentrate again on the ones which are not achieved. The first one, which is 301, speaks to the issue of private sector companies and state organs, where we're supposed to have signed up MOUs or MOAs or SLAs. And we plan for the year to have about 4 of those. Now, for Q4, we plan that we'd achieve 3, but we achieved nothing, and therefore the underperformance is -3. But again, the challenge is in Q3, although we planned to achieve 1, we were able to work and achieve 4.
So when we finally report in this, it will also change from red to green when we speak to the annual report, Chair. Then in terms of the 302, DI 302, which speak to the number of military veterans and their dependents provided with approved funding for skills development program. For the year, we planned 5,500 Chair. And for the quarter, our plan was 1,500, but we have managed to get 351. This is one of those targets. In terms of setting the target has been a challenge, and also the capacity and capability within the environment also to manage this has been a challenge. But we have at least managed to also through the now presence of the new chief director which has been appointed and the officials within that environment, they have managed, and with the DDG, they have managed to engage the relevant department and sectors in terms of sector training authorities and looking at the skills required in terms of the country to set up some service level agreement as it was indicated, and then also looking at a proactive action to deal with this going forward, because in the past we've been relying more on people applying themselves, but now we want at least to drive this program in a proactive manner going forward. That's the issue of the corrective measures going ahead. The last one in this environment, which speaks to 305 Chair, speaks to the memorial sites being erected, and we plan 3, and we have not achieved anything in terms of the quarter and right through the year. And part of the challenge here is that the erection of any structures in terms of building and designing of those, we rely on other government departments to assist and support. And this is where we are saying in terms of corrective action, the Department of Arts and Culture and Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, we need to at least strengthen those interaction and relation and make sure that in the planning process for us to achieve what we want to achieve, that is achievable. And this is what, in terms of our intergovernment relations, we want to strengthen our stakeholder management to make sure that this is achieved. But it's been a challenge in the past, but we have at least started engaging the 2 government departments to make sure that we can move forward. Chair, in terms of the department, next slide.
Now, Chair, for us, for the financials, we allocated 752.6 million, and we're able to spend about 476.9 million, which is 73%. And mainly the challenge there in terms of the under expenditure, Chair, which is about 175.6 million, is informed by us under spending on the education support, housing, skills development, and heritage. Education has been explained the part of the us at least not spending what we thought we'd be spending because of NSFAS coming on board. Housing has got a challenge, although we have achieved in terms of the houses built, but in terms of the payment, because we are required to top up the Department of Human Settlement at provincial level, and then we rely on them invoicing us. But what has at least become quite clear, when their finances are not at least moving, then they tend not to invoice us. And this was a challenge again, mainly one of those was the housing. Then we could not pay them, although they've given us the houses. Therefore, that speaks into a more, at least a robust engagement, so that we don't budget this side, and then they give houses, but they don't invoice us. We need to look at that. Skills development and heritage has been explained. Then, in terms of goods and services, there's been an under expenditure, but it's reflected also that in terms of health services, what was budgeted for, we overspent, and then we had to get monies, and then part of the monies which we were able to take was coming from the travel and subsistence
the ease of venue and facilities and accommodation. The reason why we could not use the money on the question of travel and subsistence, venue and facilities, we did plan 2 conferences, Chair. Those conferences, one was speaking to the Unity Conference of the MK, the other one was Sandbar Conference. Those could not take place for a number of reasons, and therefore that money could not flow, Chair. So that would be, at least in terms of finances, what one would want to say at this stage, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General and Bobby. The presentation was comprehensive. We thank you for this. Colleagues, General mentioned at the beginning that 2 of our military veterans succumbed to COVID-19. COVID-19 related illness. I think it's proper that we extend our condolences, deepest condolences to the families of those 2 military veterans. You said 2, General, eh?
One was recovered. The one who was coming from Northern Cape, who went for dialysis in Cape Town, is still in Cape Town, but he has recovered from COVID-19. The other one in Eastern Cape says succumbed. So 1.
Or 1 succumbed. Okay. Our condolences goes to the family of this member, the military veteran who has succumbed to the COVID-19 illness. All right. 2, General, I think you are doing fine. On the bursary things, don't relent on demanding the abridged certificate. I think there's a good reason why we must insist on the unabridged birth certificate, so that we don't fund dependents that we are not supposed to be funding. Otherwise, if we don't, it will open up a space for other people to take this particular benefit for a right. We appreciate that. And the colleagues are now opening the platform up for discussion. And as again, I don't see the indications, the hands indicating to make a comment. I will then go by, please recognize me. Okay, Mr. Ryder, I think wants to Mr. Ryder, and then who else? I asked Mr. Ryder to speak. Who else wants to speak on the matter, on the issues at hand? Miss Bukios. The third person is Shelembe.
Correct.
Oh, Mr. Shelembe.
And myself, Chair Mutle.
And Mr. Mutle. All right. I'll take this for now. DM, we have been together on matters DMV. I'm not too sure if you want to say something. I want members to confine themselves to the presentation, because we have had elaborate discussion on the DMV matters. And some matters have been accepted as work in progress, and I don't want people to go beyond what has been presented today, but I don't stop them. DM, you want to say something before I open it up?
Chair, thank you very much. Not at this point. I would defer to members of the committee to interact with the report and to get the department to respond. And I will come in after the responses of the department just on those areas where there may be need for certain things to be highlighted, to be emphasized, or any additional information from the ministry that will provide.
Sure. I think that is in order, DM. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Ryder?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, there are probably a number of questions that could be asked, but there's only one that captures my mind at the moment, and that I'm struggling to release, and that is the issue that was highlighted recently about the fact that the Department of Military Veterans gave us a presentation where there seemed to be some subterfuge or not acknowledgement of the fact that there had been wasteful expenditure in terms of the project that was dealing with the skills audit. In fact, there was some incorrect information given about that. Now, the subsequent comment was that the information had been delivered incorrectly and that people needed to account for that. Now, and people would come and come before our committee and give decent account. I haven't seen that account today, and I'll put it to the committee again, Chair, that someone has misled Parliament, whether willfully or not, but that needs to be accounted for. And I want to hear, this would have been an ideal opportunity because we're dealing with quarter four, we're dealing with the financial year. No doubt the wasteful expenditure will need to be reported through this. And I thought today would have been the opportunity to come forward and declare. It hasn't been done, which makes me even more concerned, Chairperson. And I feel that this committee is being taken lightly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Reiter. Ms. Bukos.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Chair, my first one is on the capturing and verification of military veterans. And I think it's taking way too long, and it seems that there is no urgency to conclude the process. Can't they come up with a progressive plan to engage and induct them of what they need or what is a military veteran? And is there a program in place? If not, is there a time frame for concluding the capturing? It's the first one. Chair, my second one then is on the skills development. What they said, it's far below the set target, and they propose the review of target in the next cycle, a more proactive approach. But what do they have in mind? Chair, I think in Afrikaans sê ons, ek voel hulle het 'n rigide benadering, so they must change that. Then on the corrective action that they propose in education is also to review the future target for. I don't think there's a need to review the target, Chair. They must just change the approach. I'm an advocate for engagement. What programs or processes do you have in mind or in place to engage with beneficiaries for education? Because most of them are not aware, but some of them don't even have matric because of certain circumstances. What is the current cases of the fraud cases? And was there any consequences for those who was part of it? Then just out of curiosity, Chair, what is the current status of women at SMS level, and was there any new appointments? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Mr. Shalembe.
Thank you, Chairperson. My question will relate to the issue of educational assistance. Well, I mean, I saw that in 2019 there were complaints from some of the military veterans that the Department of Military Veterans was not able to pay educational institutions on time. But what I want to know, if they can, what was the cause of that delay, I mean, in that 2019 to 2020? And what is the possible solution that will help to avoid such similar instances taking place, I mean, in the future? Then two, Chairperson, there is still a going concern that the military veterans are finding it extremely difficult to access medical assistance due to non-existence of military hospitals in the 6 provinces. As we know that only Gauteng, Western Cape and Free State that do have, I mean, the military hospitals. So now, what is the department doing to address that situation so that, I mean, in future, at least we know that something is being done, or, I mean, otherwise one will say the 3 military hospitals that are already available are like now, there's no need for other provinces to have those military hospitals. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shilembe. Mr. Mutle?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I want to ask few questions and make an input or a comparison at the end. Looking at the presentation, maybe let me first ask, because the presentation only speaks to targets which were on average, not met. If you take all targets that they have set for themselves and you look at those who are not met and those who were partially met, if you do an average, you will find out that overall they have not managed to get a 50% out of all. So it is an indication of underperformance. But most importantly is that I don't understand why haven't they given us also the financial performance for the quarter. Maybe they've got a reason why. I would like to get the reason why haven't they given us the financial performance for the quarter, because we can't play oversight over on targets only and not be able to get an understanding in terms of the financial commitments that were made, whether they were able to spend accordingly for that particular quarter. And on the invoices, it said that I think about 58% of legitimate invoices, as they term it, were paid within 30 days. What about the rest of, I think it should be 30 or 40 something, 42. What about them? Because this is a legislative prescripts or mandate that all invoices should be paid within 30 days. The reason why I'm picking up this a matter of unpaid invoices is because it affects, in the main, Chair, small businesses. We are not aware who is necessarily doing business, but at the later stage probably we'll have to find out. They must be able to present to us a spreadsheet to say these are the companies that are benefiting from DMV, classify them in terms of who are veterans, who are young people, who are women, so forth and so on, and the demographics, so that we can be able to see whether in terms of transformation or in terms of the BEE, they are meeting those criteria and ensuring that people who are supposed to benefit are benefiting from their supply chain system. So if they can clarify that. And as for the rest, I think the first slide where they've got yellowish colors indicating the performance in terms of their targets set it very clear. To the General Mukwebi, will I be wrong to compare you and your team to a teacher who sets an exam and also prepare a memorandum, but when that particular teacher is given the very same exam to write, he or she fails that particular will I be wrong to you, for me to compare you to that teacher who fails an exam set by him or herself because you have set targets for yourself, you are unable clearly to achieve those targets. So, I mean, it's disappointing, Chair, to say the least, with regard to the performance that the DMV is presenting. It leaves much to be desired. It means beneficiaries out there remains vulnerable and they will continue to be vulnerable whilst the department is grappling with its own internal system to ensure that it delivers that which it's meant for beneficiaries to the beneficiaries themselves. Chair, I think I'll for now pause there if they can clarify, particularly why have they not given us the financial performance for the quarter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much. DG?
Chair?
Who's that?
Chair?
Yes?
It's Lekwase. I'm using a phone and can't raise a hand from here.
Okay, over to you, ma'am.
No, Chair, I think partly I'm covered by Honorable Dukas, but my other question is, if these targets are not met and the financial year comes to an end, does the department roll over the targets that was meant for the previous financial year, or they develop new targets completely and overlook the ones that they did not meet? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and then to take your question further, do they learn anything from the underperformance so that in the next financial year they improve on those targets? Because it's pointless to keep posting the targets that you are not going to every year, knowing full well that you are not going to meet. You did not meet the previous year, you did not meet that other year, you also did not meet that other year, but you keep posting the same target going forward. I think your question, thank you so much for that. I think it ties in with Mr. Mutle's question. Right, let's do this. General, you have 5 minutes to deal with the questions, 5 to 8 minutes.
Thanks, Honorable Chair and members. Honorable Rider, in terms of the skills audit, we have probably, if it was not a question of probably try to hide anything in terms of that, we are looking exactly what actually happened, and now we know what has happened in terms of the objective set and the agreement set with the service provider and what was delivered and what was paid. There's a discrepancy, and this is what we're dealing with. I would leave it at that, Chair. But for reporting,
perhaps let's close this one on this issue. That when we invite you back, when we next invite you, we'll indicate that in our letter. You just give us a progress report on your investigation into the issue, and also action taken against the officials that may have been responsible for the collapse of the project, of the audit scale. But is the issue of leading Parliament. We'll deal with it when we come to do the report, so that we just correct the record then, so that we don't deal with it in a rush. We'll have one item that deals with this matter, a standalone item that deals with this matter. Are you happy, Writer, if we put it that way? Okay, I'm sure he's happy. Over to you, General.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of Ms. Pieckers, with regards to capturing and verification, yes, we've got a plan, and luckily we've got a chief director who have just reported, who has put up that plan.
And this is why, if we look at the Q3, where we were at 37, although we planned for 30. So for us, in terms of making sure that the details of military veterans who are in the system, in terms of their addresses, their ID numbers, and also their contact numbers, and that they are in fact military veterans, and the background of those, we've got a plan. In terms of progress report, we'll be ready at least to provide that when required. Also, in terms of education, the challenge we've been having with education speaks to that when people were providing the actual details of their dependents, and then it was more informed by the affidavits. Then when we started looking for the issue of the birth certificate, unabridged certificate, we started at least picking up challenges. And also when then we started following the route in terms of tertiary education, we started then at least also realizing that some do qualify under NSFAS and some don't. But the original planning of the targets was where we were the ones running that program. But now that we know that we can engage NSFAS, although NSFAS have got their own challenges, and we are engaging them in terms of our service level agreement, how to manage those kind of challenges going forward. So yes, we need to make sure that we understand the issue of planning and setting targets. And also we need to be informed by our experience in the past history in terms of what we've been in the past, so that we can change it for the better. And this is what we're at least engaged in terms of planning at this stage. The skills development, I'll give it to Ms. Mafo just to cover that one in terms of setting up those targets and what plans are in place to make sure that what we have been doing again in the past, setting up those targets and achieving the targets, what has been the challenge, and how then are we at least looking at moving forward and make sure that we don't set targets which we cannot achieve. Ms. Mafo.
Thank you very much, General. Chair, we have done as a department an introspection and came to accepting that we were reactive in nature, in that we would sit and wait for an application that comes from a military veteran, and that slowed the pace of processing the actual applications. We then, as a result of that, went and approached different sitters to say to them, what will you be providing in terms of your specific sitter, and then we will then package the necessary skills informed by what is deemed as a required skill in the market in the Department of Labor. So we are aware of our shortcomings, Chair, and we are addressing them by looking at what is deemed as a scarce skill and packaging through working with SITA those courses. We have interacted towards the end of the fourth quarter with UNISA, and I think to a large extent military veterans benefited out of that program. We are in the process of strengthening that relationship through an MOU so that UNISA can also be able to assist the department in terms of packaging the necessary courses.
Yes, I've covered the point. It's where you become more proactive, and that's fine. I'm just, if you have time, I think I think that was adequate, Ms. Murphy.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you may move forward.
Thanks, Chair. The question from Honorable Shalamba in terms of payment on time and the reason why invoices are not paid on time. The challenge we've been having, first of all, is in terms of invoices, we were looking for the original invoice, not the copies. And then also the issue of the invoices, once we receive them, when we must pay them, according to National Treasury, we must also make sure that if we are paying for the private learning institution, then that those schools are tax compliant. And now again, that becomes a challenge because some of the schools are not necessarily tax compliant, and it takes going forward and backwards, engaging them to get at least the confirmation that they are tax compliant. And some of the schools, which are public schools, also is the issue of the banking details. Then to clarify and get those banking details, we've been at least having challenges. But now going forward, the question is, what have we done to make sure that all these challenges do not lead to us not paying these invoices on time? We have engaged the NSPAS. We're working with them in terms of that and how we are going to at least manage to deal with that. But in terms of Department of Basic Education, we've got a memorandum of understanding with them, and they've allowed also us that we deal with the provincial departments of basic education, where we're putting up some service level agreement. What that allows us, it allows us to piggyback on their system. And in terms of their system, they know who is at school and at what school, and who is a class teacher and whatever. And therefore, our payment going forward is going to be at least processed through the Department of Basic Education and us paying direct to the various schools. So we go to a province, we give them the schools, we give them the students where they are, and then we transfer the money, then they will be paid. And then, of course, they will also be, in terms of this arrangement, be able to give us progress of the students, because sometimes we find that either the students are no longer there or there is no progress in terms of performance. But we are looking forward to that.
That would be fine with respect to public schools. With private schools?
With private schools, we have activated our own. There are not that many in terms of the various provinces. They are manageable. What we were not necessarily doing in the past, we were at least not utilizing our provincial offices, which we have activated. Now they are playing part here. So through them, they will be able now to go direct to the private schools, which are manageable in terms of numbers.
No, thank you so much. Let me end you on just deal with the women representation at SMS. I will leave the healthcare one, and the targets not met, and maybe do the women one and the budget information that was not presented. I will then leave the three to DM. The three I leave to DM, I leave the healthcare access, right? That is still being difficult to members who are in areas where some footprint, and the targets not met, about 30% as per the Department of Admission of the targets that were met. And then I think those are the two in the main. And yeah, and what? Yes, just close on women representation, budget information, and the invoices within 30 days. Just those three acting Director General, those three.
Thanks, Chair. For the 30-day invoices, and the CFO will take that one. CFO.
Thank you, General Chair and members. As indicated earlier, Chair, I think the issues, as we have reported, are administrative in nature, but as a department, we are addressing them. Partly on Q4, it was mainly the departure of a bus syscon. We use the bus system to disperse. And in terms of then assigning profiles to users in bus, there was a lapse due to the departure of the syscon. As also that coupled with the other transaction that is related mainly to the that we have with our service provider for travel and management. So all of those are being addressed by management, Chair. I would like to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll tie you down. Women representation, just quick. SMS, are you improving? Yes or no, and we leave.
We are on at least in position, Chair. We've just appointed about 4 of directors who are senior ladies in terms of internal audit, legal, GTO, and director policy. They are all ladies.
They're doing well, and then I think that takes care of all the budget information.
My sincere apology, Chair, to the honourable members. I think that was an oversight from our side. Let me just at least indicate. We will make sure that it's provided. Apologies for that.
We'll make that information available within a week's time. Thank you so much. Diane, I'm leaving you with just the 2 items, but any other thing that you may want to say. Just, because, just those 2. There was a concern that they've not met the targets, all the targets. In fact, they are 30%, and that there is an issue of access to healthcare by members. Just that, and then any other thing, and you close.
Chair, thank you very much, and once again, thank you for the opportunity to share this information with committee members. The quarterly report we were looking at, honorable members, according to the presentation, it says this is preliminary information of the 4th quarter.
Yeah.
And I thought that in the presentation, that qualification would be explained to the committee with respect to the information that is contained in here. How preliminary is it, and in what respect? Because I think that is important. One is tempted to conclude that the targets that are reflected in the report where there is underachievement, it is possibly one of the reasons why the report is said to be preliminary. Maybe further information or additional information was not yet captured. I do not know. I'm just making an assumption here. The reason being that if it is the final information, the information itself is not preliminary. The last quarter was notably below the performance in the other quarters. It means it was worse compared to the other quarters in many respects. And in other areas, of course, the report says we did not perform well because of the COVID-19 pandemic impact. Even though when you scrutinize the different areas of work where this is adduced as a reason for underperformance, it is not very convincing because the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions of movement and everything as far as our work is concerned only happened in the last week of the last quarter, the very last week of March. So it could not have been the reason entirely for the underperformance in the quarter that started in January. That's the first point that I wanted to make. The second point, Chair, to committee members, is that the remarks made around the weaknesses in our planning are well placed, concerns and observations. There are still very serious planning challenges that we will work to overcome. If I may just give a sense to committee members of what I am referring to, where observations and lessons registered in the previous, financial years, that experience does not seem to bring about improvement the way the members were lamenting. There is an issue here that the performance indicators that we have, in some areas, you are not sure if right at the beginning, the annual targets were properly set. Not properly set, maybe properly or fully, discussed the implications of all the factors around those performance targets. If, for instance, we look at the performance with respect to education and the issuing of bursaries as one of, for instance, the critical areas, the target for the year was 7,466. It would have been based on something, among others, maybe the baseline of the previous year's number of recipients and the budgets available. So there is no money spent throughout the year except for what then gets spent right at the end of the financial year, which is this very last quarter, the fourth quarter. When you look at quarter one right up to quarter three, there's no money spent. So what it suggests is that the number of people who were supposed to get this assistance were for in education this calendar year, 2020 calendar year. And the payments were therefore made only now in between January and to the end of March. And then they say, the reason why there is deviation, we only paid for 4,446 is because students previously funded by DMV were referred to NSFAS. There was no intake for new applicants during 2019-2020 for tertiary education. If in the plans it was not anticipated that NSFAS was going to come into their plans to take over some of this, part of the population that they were supporting. If that was not envisaged, they did not see ahead to the point where this thing happened, then what it means is that this would have been a pleasant overachievement on their part, because you see, the people they're targeted to assist, they've been assisted by NSFAS, but the point is they must then satisfy the committee and everyone by providing the information that indeed those who theoretically are taken care of by NSFAS actually did receive that support from NSFAS. Then they would register it. It would not be an underperformance. It would be a performance to the target, but also a saving on their part, if the NSFAS monies that they are talking about were not transfers from the department. I'm just saying the way they are planning, the planning in this document is, it suggests that there wasn't adequate, forecasting of what was going to be happening, such that even where the department has actually performed well, they say it's a red there. But maybe it is a red because that NSFAS came in to assist is just a theoretical, assumption that has not been verified. But that is something which I just thought in relation to planning. It's an indication that we could have done better. Then there is another challenge where the red comes out of total lack of information throughout the year in all the quarters. And that lack of information may suggest inaction on important work that was supposed to be done. I'm talking performance indicators. If I may just give an example, the department said we will approve a policy for pensions. We will approve a policy for transport. Throughout the 3 quarters, there's nothing shown there. And at the end of the year, which is the last financial quarter, the fourth quarter of the financial year, what we are saying there is that there is no approved policy. And the reason is because there's intense consultation, which is awaiting to be signed off. But the corrective action says policy must still be finalized. So you are not sure of exactly what is the accurate state of affairs in the areas where there is no policy. Is it because, yes, work has been done consistently throughout the year, the policies are ready, they are only waiting to be signed off, or there is still work that needs to be done around those policies? I'm just saying the integrity of information shared partly in this fourth quarter report is it's a bit of a problem in that it does not empower members to take or to come up with the appropriate advices to the department as what needs to be done. The other point, which is a planning also, challenge or weakness, is with respect to the percentage of approved burial claims paid within 30 days of receipt. There, the report says we have performed very well, it is green. But from a planning point, if we were looking at funding for the burial of indigent deceased people, that funding cannot be done retrospectively. You can't bury poor, people who are paupers, bury them by providing money after they've been buried. What I'm saying, that the point that I'm making is that the target, the performance indicator, should not have been approved burial claims. It should have been approved burial support, money released to bury these people, which should not be subjected to the 30 days, payment of invoices. Generally, that applies to the supply chain. It is a different matter. So the green there, if you were to go to military veterans and say the Department of Military Veterans, Parliament says, with respect to burying you guys, it has performed well. Obviously, there would be others who disagree and who actually would feel very provoked, because indeed they had to bury people with their own monies. Monies, yes, they could have been received, but it would have been long after the difficulty of paying those people were grappled with under very challenging situations. That is by way of saying, Chair, that we need to improve planning, and these are issues in terms of indicators of performance, indication of the financial flows throughout the year, which in this financial year, the annual performance plans that we have, these are matters that we must follow up to make sure that we assist the department to marry budgets and plans such that in relation to some of our work, we can actually track whether work is happening or is not happening just by looking at the movement of money. But in this information that we have, we are unable to marry the two, the movement of money and the performance of work the department must deliver on. But I agree that these are matters that will, on an ongoing basis, seek to improve on. Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity.
No, thanks very much, DM. at least it gives us some comfort that these matters are actually attended to, and that when we deal with your budget 21-22, at least to be moving from a cleaner slate. It's work that needs to be mopped up during this year. In other words, that is tied in with other issues that we have raised before, that we have committed the ministry to actually attending. So, because until those matters have been dealt with, performance will keep on showing some weaknesses that the honorable members have actually picked up. We've been talking about these things over a number of months since we started meeting with this department, until we said, no, maybe we need to escalate these issues to your level. And it's good that you are now experiencing what we have been experiencing as a portfolio committee. But with the commitment, we are happy. And we're not going to say much for now. We wait until all the systemic issues and policy issues, structural issues, and staffing issues have been attended to, including the cleaning up of the performance information. And we hope that next year we'll start on a clean slate. That's an undertaking as we seem to be getting from your side. With that, colleagues, thank you very much. I thank you, General Nkwebi, for your interaction. And I'm sure this process is, we've all learned from this process, all of us, members, ministry, and yourself and the team. And we'll assist each other to navigate through this difficult period, and until we reach a stage where we finally can say we now have a functional, department. So far, there's been serious weaknesses, but these weaknesses are known. With that, colleagues, thank you very much, and we've gone past our time. DM Sabonga Kulumfetu for a presentation. Colleagues, Sabonga, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Long live the Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you very much.